If you know me, then you know I love to travel. Long ago, when I was forced to identify my life's priorities, I came to the realization that travel and new experiences would be something I always plan and budget for. It would be something that I would happily spend my money on, with a proper budget, of course, but also enjoy it with no regrets. And since that realization, I have been to some amazing places, including 15 different countries. And I've almost seen all of the United States. I just have 14 more states to hit. In this episode, I'm sharing some of my most memorable destination experiences and some places that are very high on my travel bucket list. Now, before I dive into my travel bucket list and destination experiences, I do want to acknowledge a few things. First, travel may not be important to everyone, and that is 100% okay. If travel and exploration does not resonate with you, I encourage you to find the things that you love and enjoy, things that are worth you spending your money on. If travel is not it, that's totally fine. Second, travel is a luxury. It costs money. And while you can travel hack your way to some amazing places, just listen to episode 12, an introduction to travel hacking for more. I'll link to it in the show notes. It does cost money to travel. If you need to space out travel so it works for you and your budget and your goals, that is 100% okay. If you need to hold off on travel until you have some goals done, like paying down debt or building an emergency fund, that's also okay. You can work your way up to traveling. One thing that you don't want to do, and I'm speaking from past experience, is spend money that you don't have on travel. So using credit cards, using rent money, using money that is allocated to other things just so you can take a trip. Not only will you not enjoy the trip as much as you probably could, but when you get back, you're going to be extremely stressed out and probably regret taking the trip in the first place. So if you do want to prioritize travel, just make sure you're doing it from a financially responsible place. Okay, so now let me share with you some of my destination experiences. For a little bit of context, I have actually been on planes and in airports since I was a baby. I'm talking like 6 months old. Both of my parents are from Rochester, New York, and my brother and I were born in Austin, Texas, and we had no other family in Texas. So we would always be going to Rochester from, like I said, when I was a very small child or a baby until probably about high school we stopped going. But it got to a point where when my brother and I were old enough, my dad would take us to Rochester. We would stay there for the entire summer. My dad would go back to Austin to work. And then when our trip was coming to an end, my mom would come pick us up. We would spend time with her family, and then we would go back to Texas. So I have been like out of the house since I was little. I would spend summers away from home. I know I've talked about this before on the podcast, but I think that experience or those experiences when I was so little really did contribute to me being an independent person, but also me being okay with traveling to different places and being in different environments. Like, I don't always just want to be home. Don't get me wrong, I love being home, but I love being home after coming from a trip. So a little bit of context, I've been traveling since before I had cognitive memory to understand what was happening. So going to Rochester, New York, first experiences with traveling. Another kind of big first that happened because my family is from Rochester is we went to Canada. So Rochester, New York is very close to the Canadian border. Niagara Falls, all of that is over there. So when I was, I want to say maybe 10 or 11, my family, so like my cousins, all of us, my uncles, aunts, we did like a little mini road trip from Rochester to Canada. We went to this theme park called Wonderland, and it was so cool. I remember I got a little Canadian dollar and I still have it somewhere, but that was my first international. I don't even know if that's a proper way to phrase it, but that was my first trip out of the country. You didn't need a passport to go to Canada at that time, so it wasn't a huge deal, but I do remember that, and that was a fun experience. My next sort of international or new country trip was when I was 13, and my mom, my uncle, myself, and my brother, we went to Mexico. We went to a resort in Cozumel for my uncle's 50th birthday. You didn't need a passport to go to Mexico at that time either, so it was a pretty easy trip. It was fun. I mean, I was 13, so I was in this really awkward stage. I would like stay in the hotel some afternoons while my mom, my brother, my uncle were out enjoying the beach and stuff. I don't even know what was going through my head. I think I was just like hot with the sun. I don't know. I didn't take full advantage of that experience like I probably should have. But I do remember it. I do remember it being a very nice resort. I remember the buffet, and it was ultimately a great experience, and I know my uncle had a good time. So moving on to kind of my next true international trip. So literally like not Canada, not Mexico, but taking a plane far, far away. My boyfriend and I, this was very early in our relationship, so I was probably 23 maybe. We booked a Mediterranean cruise. So we had to fly from Los Angeles to Venice, and then the cruise left from Venice. So we stayed a night in Venice. So cool. I loved it there. It was raining a lot, but it was such a beautiful place. And then the cruise went from Venice to Bari, Italy. That was a very cool place as well. And then it went to Turkey. We hit Izmir, Turkey, Istanbul, Turkey, and then we went to Greece. It was Katakolon, so looking at some of the ruins in Greece, and then it ended in Dubrovnik, Croatia. So I went hard with international countries at that time. Definitely had to get a passport for that. And it was such a cool experience. I think that is what really triggered my desire to travel and explore. Like that first trip really set the bar high for me. And since then, I've been on quite a few other international trips. Another big one was I did a girls' trip with two of my best friends to Thailand. So we flew from Houston to, we had to stop in Japan. And from Japan, we flew to Bangkok. We stayed a couple nights in Bangkok. Then we took a flight to Phuket. Beautiful. Oh my gosh, we stayed at a Marriott hotel, and it was right on the beach. The view was amazing. Stayed there a few nights and then went to Chiang Mai. And then we ended in Bangkok. So we flew in Thailand. So we took flights from Bangkok to Phuket, Phuket to Chiang Mai, which was a very cool experience. And then we left out of Bangkok. That was a really cool trip. That was my first Asian experience type trip, and it was very, very different. I don't know if you've seen like the letters or the alphabet for Thailand. It's very different. Very cool experience. Had a great time. Another international trip I took was to South Africa. My boyfriend, he's actually from Cape Town, and he lived there up until he was 12 or 13. So we went back in, I think it was 2017. We stayed a couple weeks there. I didn't know what to expect. I've seen pictures and things like that, but you don't know a place until you actually go there. But I will say it is such a beautiful place. The mountains, the beach, the greenery, it is truly gorgeous. I absolutely loved it there. Another big international trip was to Italy. So I know I had mentioned that we flew into Venice years and years ago, but this time I wanted to actually spend some time in Italy and actually go around to the different parts of Italy. So I created this entire itinerary where we flew into Rome, stayed a couple nights in Rome, stayed a night in Florence, and we took trains everywhere. And then from Florence, we went to Milan. Now, Milan is on the border of Switzerland. So we did like a little tour activity where we actually went to Switzerland, which is very cool. Wasn't really expecting to get 2 countries in there, but I did. And then from Milan, we went to Rimini, which is like the beach area. It's on a different side of the country. Very cool. I actually saw, I was doing my research. I saw on Jersey Shore, they went to Riccione. That was a little bit too far south for us, but doing my research, I found Rimini. So we went to Rimini, and then we went to Naples, where we spent some time in Positano, which was freaking gorgeous. The Amalfi Coast. Holy cow, so amazing. And then we ended with one night in Rome and flew back. So that was an amazing trip. I want to do something very similar to that with France. And I know I've talked about this as being a goal for this year. Probably won't happen in 2024, but definitely next year. I'm hoping to do a similar kind of tour of the country of France. And then as far as other international places, I would say the rest of my list is the Caribbean. I have taken plenty of cruises, flown into the Caribbean. I've been to the Bahamas, which I will say the Bahamas, from what I've experienced so far, the best beaches, like white sand, crystal blue water. Definitely love the Bahamas, but also been to Jamaica, the Cayman Islands, Honduras, Belize. Those were all cruises. So with cruises, what I kind of like about them is that you get to see multiple places in one trip. So a lot of Caribbean cruises will go to those places. Highly recommend that. Spend some time in Aruba. My boyfriend and I, we spent 9 days out there. That was also a very beautiful place. I went to Turks and Caicos for my 30th birthday. My boyfriend was there. My best friends were there. That was a fun trip. I did a couples trip to Antigua and Barbuda. That was a pretty beautiful island as well. And then I've also spent some time in the U.S. Virgin Islands, so St. Thomas and St. John. Now I want to talk a little bit about my domestic travel experiences. So staying in the United States, as I mentioned, I only have 14 more states left to visit. So I've been to 36 states. I used to actually drive from Texas to California when I was in school. So my first year of college, I didn't have a car. My second year of college, I got a car and had to drive it up there right before second year started. So driving from Texas to California, you automatically hit New Mexico, Arizona. So, you know, I've seen those states. I've actually spent time there as well. So doing those road trips back and forth multiple times has been fun. I also did a road trip to the East Coast with my boyfriend. So now I feel like the western side of the country is a little bit more spacious. I mean, Texas alone is a huge state, but the East Coast, you have a lot of like states that are really close together and not too far to get to. So doing the road trip on the East Coast, we hit so many states, and I don't count myself as being to a state unless I've like actually walked on the ground, not in an airport, but like walked on the ground, experienced the state, like gone into a store or whatever. So doing that road trip to the East Coast, we were doing a lot of stops so that I could really knock some states off my list. Another cool place I've been in the US is Alaska. We went maybe in like in October, so it was very cold, but it was a perfect time for the Northern Lights. And I don't know if you've experienced the Northern Lights before, but sometimes you can see them, sometimes you can't. It's just kind of hit or miss. We didn't see it for the first 2 nights of the trip, and we had one more night left. And I was a little, anxious. Am I going to get to experience it? Fortunately, we did, and it was such a cool experience. I will also say we also did a hot springs in Alaska. And that was very cool because it was extremely cold out, but this natural hot springs, it's like a hot tub. So that was a very cool experience. I also went to Hawaii. Hawaii is beautiful. I thought Florida had the best beaches in the United States, but I would say Hawaii takes the cake. Florida is probably second. Hawaii is definitely number one. When I was little, my dad had a house in New Mexico, so we would go to New Mexico quite often when he had that house, or when I was living in California for school, I would meet him there. He'd fly in with my brother. I'd fly in from California and just spend some time with him there. And then I would say the most visited states were or are California. I mean, I used to live there for school. Nevada. I go to Las Vegas probably once a year, sometimes even more. New York, as I mentioned, going there as a little kid, that's definitely a most visited state. So I would say all those places high on my most visit list. Also, my boyfriend actually lived in New York City for over a year, so I spent a lot of time out there. Very cool place to see. So that covers some of my travel destination experiences. Let's talk about my travel bucket list. So let me just throw this out there. I want to see as much as I possibly can. So if there's an opportunity to go to a place that's maybe not on this list I'm about to share, I'm still going to take it. I want to see as much as I possibly can before I pass away. But from an international perspective, some places that are high on my bucket list are Europe. So I actually have a honeymoon goal. I want to spend 3 to 4 weeks in Europe, and I want to take the train to as many places as possible. I basically want to go on a trek through Europe. So kind of like what I did with Italy and what I want to do with France, with Europe, I want to hit multiple countries in one go. So I want to explore as much as possible in those countries over that 3 to 4 week time frame as I possibly can. So that's very high on my travel bucket list. I already mentioned doing a tour of France. That's obviously on my list. I want to see Iceland, and specifically because I saw the Northern Lights from Alaska, but I want to see the Northern Lights from other parts of the world. And I know Iceland is a big destination for that. I want to go to the French Polynesia, Tahiti, Bora Bora, Makatea. I want to see those places. I love a good beach. That's why I've been to the Caribbean so much, but I know there are other parts of the world where the beaches are just like pristine. And I'm sure the Maldives is high on that list as well. I do want to explore South America. I feel like South America, there are a lot of countries in that continent. And so I do want to explore out there. And then Japan. And I remember I had asked my dad, is there a place that you would just love to see? And he said Japan. My parents never really traveled much outside of the US, outside of Canada and Mexico, like I shared earlier. So it would be nice to go to a place that I know my dad would have wanted to go. And then for the United States, I definitely need to hit the final 14 states. I want to see all 50 states. But I think if I were to identify what I want to hit first, it would definitely be the northeastern part of the country. So I definitely want to see Maine, Vermont, New Hampshire. I want to see the Dakotas. I definitely want to see Mount Rushmore. I want to go to Montana, and then Michigan and Wisconsin. So I think, I'm not too far away, and the states that I still have to hit are kind of in similar areas. So I could probably knock out a couple in one go. But that's it. That is my travel bucket list and destination experiences. I encourage you to check out Vacation Planning on a Budget, that podcast episode, and How to Stay in Budget While on Vacation for tips on how to budget for your future trips. I'll be sure to link to those in the show notes, but happy traveling.